Hi Jake, how are you today?
Good. How are you, Shirley?
Not too bad, thanks. I thought we might talk about folk heroes today.
Sure.
I don't really know much about American folk heroes. Are there
Sure.
any that you have a favourite or?
Well, actually, my hometown in the United States happens to be known as one of the hometowns for Paul Bunyan. And
I think I've heard of that name, but I don't know anything about him.
Paul Bunyan was a lumberjack. Like, he would cut down trees,
Okay.
and he was supposedly a very giant man. He was huge. And I don't know if he actually ever lived in some time in the past, but maybe he was just a very large man, but somehow the stories have been passed down to say that he was as large as a house or as large as a skyscraper, or it completely depends on who you ask.
Wow. So not sure whether he's a mythical character or a real character.
No one really knows for sure.
What did he do?
Well, some people say that he took his axe and he dragged it behind his back across the United States, and he made the Mississippi River.
So it's a kind of story to explain why something exists.
That's part of it. And also, he had a pet, too. His pet is very famous.
And what kind of pet?
His pet was an ox, but it wasn't just an ordinary ox. It was a blue ox, and it was also oversized to
Okay.
fit with his size.
What did his pet do?
Well, his pet, I think, would just carry lumber for him or something.
So, about when did this story start? I mean, when did Paul Bunyan become famous, or when did people know about that story?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but like your country, the United States is a very young country and has a very young history since the European settlers came there. So I think it's maybe from a couple hundred years ago, maybe at the most.
Okay.
Hmm. You've lived in 3 different parts of the world, so is there any difference between each part in terms of physical contact?
Yeah, I have lived in Hong Kong, Guam, and the U.S. Hong Kong is in Asia, Guam is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and the U.S. is American culture. So in Hong Kong, I think most people would not touch each other, just give each other a little bow. I find that a bow is very common in Asia. If you're very good friends, you wouldn't really hug. Hugging, I think, is a very American thing to do. I think you would just touch each other on the shoulder or give each other a side embrace, a mini hug. In Guam, you would definitely greet your friends and family with a kiss on the cheek. A handshake is much too formal for island culture because island culture is so relaxed and laid back. You would only do a handshake with business partners or in a really formal setting. But usually a kiss on the cheek is what you receive and give when you see your family and friends. In the US, hugging is most common, I think, for friends and family. But if you're not friends and family, a handshake would probably be the most common.
Is the handshakes always the same, or is there different styles of handshake?
From what I've observed, Guam has American culture, so Guam handshakes and US handshakes are the same. I think in Hong Kong it's got a British background, so that's also very similar. I don't see any difference with the handshake.
So what about young people? Is there a different way they interact physically with each other?
Yes, definitely. In Guam, I always see people do a fist bump for close buddies of theirs. Girls would definitely hug and give each other a kiss. In Hong Kong, I don't see the fist bump often. I don't think I've ever seen it at all, actually. But for close friends, I think a side embrace or a semi-embrace would happen, but mostly just some form of touch or acknowledgement of the other person. I think it's also very common for people of the same sex to hold hands in Asia and just be friends. Woman and woman hold each other's hands if they are very, very, very good friends. And it's apparently very normal. I don't know about a guy holding another guy's hand, but if a woman and a woman hold each other's hands, it does not signal that they are together as a couple. It might just signal that they are very, very good friends or sisters.
In Australia, that would be very strange.
Yes, it would, wouldn't it? Even in America and Guam. So, Nick, let's talk about touching and holding hands and physical touch with your significant other. Do you and your partner hold hands when you go out in the street?
We hold hands all the time. Initially, when we first went out, holding hands was the first thing we did. They've progressively moved on from there to kissing. But holding hands was certainly the first thing we did in our relationship.
Do you remember when you first tried to hold her hand, or did she try to hold your hand first?
I made the first move. We were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and I was getting a bit nervous, and I couldn't quite concentrate on the movie. So I moved my hand over to hers, and she reciprocated and moved on from there. So.
You know, that's funny that you bring that up, because one of the most common moves that is made fun of in movies as well is when the guy takes a big yawn, a fake yawn, and he opens his arms wide and places it around the girl's shoulder and thus embraces her. But he had to do it because he yawned.
My experience, like my first hug was like that as well. So it was just a bit of an excuse. I was reaching for something, and then suddenly my hand went around, and she didn't mind. So
That's
it was a
very
good sign.
good. And what about kissing? Do you kiss a lot in public, in the streets?
Rarely in public, because we find it makes other people uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's true. I find that when I see couples kissing or making out in public, I usually think to myself, why don't you get a room?
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to see that. You just want to be having a conversation with them, or you don't want them to be constantly distracted.
So, Shirley, we were talking about childhood memories, and you're from Scotland. There's anything from your childhood that you can tell us?
I know I've got a really funny story, actually. Maybe I was about 10 years old or something, and we used to have this little kind of shack in the countryside that we were dragged to every weekend, and away from civilization, you know, and no running water, no electricity. So we kids had to make our own fun. I've got my brothers, myself, and a couple of cousins. We would always go there at weekends or school holidays or something. And, I mean, one of the highlights of our weekends was to go to the Sunday school, the Sunday morning church service. And one of the reasons this was attractive to the kids was because they bribed us to go there by giving us sweets when we got there. So it was great. So we always went anyway. It was a church service for about an hour and singing hymns and stuff like that. Anyway, this one Sunday we arrived early, about half an hour early. There was nobody there. The church wasn't open yet. So it was, as most people know, it rains a lot in Scotland. So on that rainy day, we all were wearing our cagoules, which is a kind of a rain jacket with a big pocket in the front. And while we were waiting for everybody else to arrive, we started just kind of playing around in the trees. There was a little river nearby. And it was at the time of year when the tadpoles were turning into baby frogs. So we got this crazy idea to collect all these. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of frogs were around. So we all got a big handful of baby frogs, put them in this big pocket of our cagoule, went off into church. So there we are. We're kind of in the middle of the crowd. You know, we weren't at the front or the back, kind of in the middle. And everybody standing up singing the hymns and really getting into, you know, the church singing and stuff like that. And then we decided that we would get the frogs out. So each of us one at a time, each of us kids one at a time, kind of crouched down as if we were tying our shoelace and let all these frogs out of our pockets. So these tiny little frogs started jumping all over the church. And there's all these ladies in their Sunday best and started squealing and screaming, and the minister didn't know what was going on, and he's trying to keep everybody calm, and we're just singing along with the hymn. You know, we're really innocent, and they had no idea because they didn't see us do it, so they had no idea what had happened. And yeah, I mean, we got away with it. We didn't get told off because we didn't get caught. And yeah, when we after the church service, you know, we had such a laugh after the church service, and yeah, that's one of my greatest childhood memories, getting up to mischief with my brothers.
Monica, you mentioned a farm homestay in New Zealand. Have you ever actually lived on a farm?
I haven't lived on a farm as such, but I've visited family friends who have lived on farms.
Oh, did you like it?
Yeah, I remember loving visiting my family friends on farms. Yeah, especially riding horses. I loved riding horses when I was young.
So are you good? Are you an equestrian professional?
I wouldn't say that. I do remember one time my mother always seems to tell people this story about when I was young, and we were at her friend's farm. I was on a horse, and the horse took off, and I was only about, I think, 10 at the time, and I was hanging off the side of this horse, and my mother was really worried for me.
Yeah.
And then when the horse finally stopped, she, you know, she came running up and asked me if I was okay and things. And apparently I said to her, "Oh, it's okay. I wanted it to go fast."
That's cute. You're lucky you didn't get hurt, though.
Yeah, wow. I guess I just didn't sense the danger.
Actually, I kind of grew up on a farm. My grandfather had a ranch growing up, so I spent every summer on his ranch. So I have quite the, I don't know, I guess I have a lot of experience.
Oh,
on a farm.
okay.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I remember when I was young, I thought the life on a farm was just the best. I mean, I had it so good, and I loved everything about living on a farm, and I thought when I was going to get older, I would want to be on a farm, but now that I'm older, I couldn't imagine doing it ever again.
Oh, what can't you imagine doing?
I don't know. I guess I just couldn't imagine all that work. And I think I'm just so addicted to city life or suburban life, and living in a house and just, you know, doing work on computers and things like that. I couldn't go back to that lifestyle. But when I was young, I have to admit, I enjoyed it a lot. So how about you? Could you see yourself moving and living on a farm?
Well, yeah, I think my thoughts are similar to yours in that I'm very used to being inside using a computer, and I'm used to a very different lifestyle to one that involves being on a farm. But yeah, I've never had a long period of time where I've stayed on a farm like you, so yeah, maybe it's a bit different for me.